U.S. Senator Eric Schmitt is now on the record. Good to have you back with us, Senator. You were at Mar-a-Lago the night of the election. You spoke on stage at the RNC. You've flown with President-elect Trump, and you've recently helped coach him for his debate. If he calls you and asks you to serve in his cabinet or as Attorney General, are you telling him no?
Why did I know you were going to lead with this question? That has not been my focus. I'm flattered that I guess it's been widely reported and you're asking. It's never been the reason why I've been helping, and I want to make sure they get off to a great start in January. So again, it's probably a pretty boring answer for you, but I really do. I believe in the movement. I think the American people sort of resoundingly affirmed that they want a secure border, they want a strong economy that works for them, they want to be respected around the world and safe at home, and that's the only reason I was doing all that stuff. And I hope to be able to help in January as well.
Well, we'll ask you about your job you have now. Should Rick Scott lead the Senate?
You know what? We're going back next week. I supported Rick last time. There's 3 people running. I have not made a decision. That's the God's honest truth. I'm talking to, even today, to all 3 candidates who are running to find out if their vision reflects, I think, where the people are at. And also there's some internal reforms I'd like to see. I'd like to see a more open amendment process, more people allowed to get involved so you don't end up with these omnibus bills. And by the way, that means Republicans and Democrats get to present ideas. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm looking for in a new majority leader, and we'll see next week.
You've also backed Senator Scott's bill to make it easier to fire federal employees, and you said, quote, terminating ineffective or ill-intentioned federal employees is needlessly burdensome and nearly impossible. How would you go about determining which federal employees have bad intentions, and are those just the ones that disagree with you?
Well, I think that, broadly speaking, the administrative state has grown over time in both Republican and Democrat administrations. A lot of these bureaucrats are just simply not accountable to people at all. Many people have no idea who they are, but they make these decisions that affect their livelihoods and their liberty. And I just think when you've got a new administration, they ought to have greater control over who the people are that are implementing the policies, as opposed to people who are sort of resisting those within the administrative state. So for me, this is a reform that would cut both ways. I just think that what you've seen right now is an entrenched bureaucracy that's not working for the American people.
Current Department of Justice policy does not treat the 1873 Comstock Act and its obscenity provisions that would ban abortion pills as active statute. They treat it as more of a dead letter. But Senator and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance penned a letter to the AG and urged him to change that policy, to crack down on abortion pills and their mailing across state lines. The FDA considers those medications safe and effective. You did not sign on to that letter. Senator Hawley did. Do you agree the federal government should ban abortion pills?
Well, I think that it ought to be, what we're dealing with, I think, is safety. I think that Senator Vance's concern was regarding safety. I'd probably have to look more closely at that. But the truth of the matter is that Plan B is never at risk. Contraception's never been at risk. The states are going to decide ultimately what their abortion policy is. Missouri's weighed in. I would expect that there'll be a countermeasure to that. It's going to play itself out over a matter of decades, I think, in this country, which is where it always should have been. The Supreme Court should have never taken that debate away from the people. The people are getting a chance to weigh in now.
But Senator Vance wants right now the Department of Justice to revive that obscenity statute that's already in federal law. Would you take any action in the Senate to strike that part of federal law out?
I'm happy to take a look at it, Mark, and we'll get back to you when I kind of know some more of the specifics.
All right. Also in the Senate, President-elect Trump promised to mandate health insurance companies or the federal government, perhaps both, pay for IVF procedures. Right now, insurance companies widely treat those as elective and rather expensive treatments. Would you vote to make an IVF coverage mandate federal law?
Well, I'd like to see the language, but in principle, I do support having greater access to IVF. And I've never shied away from taking on the insurance companies. When I was elected, St. Louis County State Senator, one of the first things I did was took on big insurance companies to make sure autism, a treatment for autism was covered and mandated. So I'm not afraid of taking on the insurance companies. I support that in principle, and we'll see what the actual language looks like.
On a different question, President-elect Trump has promised mass deportations on day one, but President Biden's administration just last year deported more people than any year under President Trump's first 4 years. What's going to be different this time around?
Well, I think it's important to remember that when Joe Biden came in, he undid the successes under President Trump, and that includes 94 executive orders where he had a complete pause on deportations altogether. So I do support deporting people here illegally, and I think a good place to start. And by the way, this has always been the policy of the United States of America, that if you come here illegally, you're detained, and either you're allowed to stay because of asylum or something, or you're deported. It's only until recently that hasn't happened with, sort of congruent with the number of people that are here. But for me, let's start with the worst of the worst.
And I know
President Trump had something called, Operation Talon that deported, illegally present convicted child offenders. Sex offenders. Let's start there. That would be a good place. Let's get rid of the criminals here illegally. Let's get rid of the Venezuelan gangs that are taking over apartment complexes. I think the American people support that.
All right, and I know we're running low on time, so real quick, when you were in the minority, you supported the filibuster. You're heading into the majority. Do you still support the filibuster?
I think it's an important measure that we have in place. I really do. Now, I will say this, though, Mark. The Democrats will not hesitate to get rid of it. And so that's the reality of the situation. So I think that understanding that dynamic, in theory, I do support it. I do think that if the Democrats had it, they would lay waste to our republic by adding justices to the Supreme Court, federalizing our elections, adding D.C. to, as a state to the union. The Republicans are not talking about any of that stuff. But I think the filibuster is an important part. But I will say Chuck Schumer has shown me where his real intentions were. We had an impeachment that came over for the first time in the history of the United States of America. We didn't have a trial. And so it's very concerning how the Democrats are willing to sort of weaponize a lot of things and get rid of a lot of the norms that have existed for 250 years.
All right, Senator Schmitt, we look forward to talking to you again soon once the new Congress is sworn in. Thanks for your time.
All right, Mark, take care.